Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. We are in the home stretch of the show, and we have our final AFC East Defensive Player of the Day in terms of IDP player profiles. And this guy, I really like. He isn't necessarily overlooked, more so undervalued. And I say this because in this defense, a lot more position groups are getting better around him, and he is going to have to remain the constant in this Buffalo Bills defense, and that player is, of course, Matt Milano. I really believe that this Buffalo Bills defense is kind of glossing over the linebacker position, mainly because Matt Milano is so central to that position group, and Von Miller is kind of aging out of that position group, that I think they're pretty happy with just allowing Matt Milano to dictate whatever the linebacker group becomes. And his flexibility truly is an asset to what the Buffalo Bills want out of this defense, because this defense definitely is very sneaky, and Matt Milano is one of the main reasons why. And so without further ado, let's jump right into what makes Matt Milano such a special player and someone who you can't undervalue any longer. Throughout his career, he's accumulated 644.8 fantasy points. His best season was in 2022, where he had 140.7 fantasy points. Last season, pretty solid season, up and down. A couple injuries beset him throughout his season. 18 solo tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 passes defended, 2 interceptions, 1 QB hit. So as you can see, not as consistent as years prior, but hey, injuries happen to the best of them. And he's still in that weird part of his career where he's entering the end of his prime years, but he still has some within him. And so when I look at Matt Milano, and I look at the makeup of the Bills linebacker room, it's a bunch of guys who, outside of him and Von Miller, who himself is getting older and might not have years in him, are really developmental guys who I really think aren't bad players, but really add to how valuable Matt Milano is at this position, because it allows him to be very flexible. If you just have guys who are sideline to sideline, can get tackles, then Matt Milano can operate in so many different ways. And when I consider the fact that the Buffalo Bills defensive front, say the defensive three, are really starting to develop into their own, I really like Ed Oliver at the D tackle position. I like what he brings in terms of physicality. I really like Greg Russo and how he's going to develop. I really like AJ Epinesa as well. They're kind of entering the prime of their careers. They're going to have breakout years. And I look at the back end. Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas are 2 young guys in the secondary who really are kind of underestimated. I think they're one of the best kind of corner groups in this entire NFL. You add a guy in Cole Bishop who I really like, Damar Hamlin, as obviously he's getting back to being incorporated into that group as well. And I really like the front and back of this Buffalo Bills defense. And when I look at the middle, it's a bunch of guys who are really focused on allowing Matt Milano to operate. Because even though you have guys in the front, you have guys like Oliver, you have guys like Epinesa, and you have guys in the back like Benford and Rasul Douglas, the main focus of the defense is what Matt Milano does. I think that obviously, as he's kind of exiting his prime years, you have to kind of be concerned about his, physicality levels, his injury concerns, his, all-around style of play, because Matt Milano is a very physical player. Make no ands, ifs, or buts about it. He's always going to be in and around every single defensive play that the Bills run. And so, what I really want to see out of Matt Milano this season It's not just him taking a back seat, but realizing that he can still be the central force, but he also needs to understand that the Buffalo Bills are now built to sustain pressure. They're built to, at every level of the defense, cover for him. Ed Oliver and AJ Epinesa can get pressure. Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas can cover their men. So, I really think that Matt Milano's going to need to understand that, hey, I can still be myself. I can still be the Matt Milano everybody knows and loves. But I also need to understand that this team is not necessarily going to be relying on me as much. And so, when I look at the roles that he plays, he's so good at guarding the screen game. He's so good at run stopping, blitzing. He wears so many hats. And I look at the ways that the Buffalo Bills can really help him out. I think that if you kind of limit Matt Milano's pressures and when he decides to blitz, I still think he's going to be one of the better linebackers in the league. Because I look at the leg injury after 5 games last season, and it was a really, really gruesome leg injury. I'm thinking about preserving the best of Matt Milano and not risking the worst, if that makes sense. He can go sideline to sideline. He can defend the pass very well. But let's not risk him in certain blitzing situations when we know that our guys up front can do the job there. We know that our corners can come up in coverage, can really jam receivers. So why risk Matt Milano when we know that he can still be impactful? In terms of IDP, I don't expect his stats to go down, and that's reflective of what I'm saying. If they incorporate all the elements of this defense to help Matt Milano alleviate some of the pressure he's putting on himself, then Matt Milano won't be forced to have to be the everyman for this defense. And it also is very reflective of this linebacker core because your best 2 guys are kind of up there in age. Matt Milano is entering his age 30 season. He still might have some prime years in him, but Von Miller is 35. He can't always play at the position. So you have to understand that, hey, we need to start finding guys who can also mitigate for the deficiencies that might befall Matt Milano in his future. So you have guys like Terrell Bernard, still in his prime. You have guys like Ulofoshio. You have guys like Balin Spector. And you got a guy actually from my high school in Shane Simon as an undrafted free agent to come into your team. And so if these guys focus more on, being active in pressures, if they become guys who are more active in defending certain passing plays, then Matt Milano's main concern will be just tackling, just finding ways into the backfield when he can, and overall preserving himself. Because pretty soon Von Miller's going to leave the league. And I don't think he's going to be an asset this year. So now's the time to start trying different things at the linebacker position surrounding Matt Milano to make sure that at the end of the day, the Bills linebacker group is not going to be the one who's bringing them down. And I like the fact that they're trying to find guys in their prime to make sure that they, if they get injured, don't necessarily end up, hurting them in the long run. Because if Matt Milano is injured, then you're really looking at a group that's kind of uncomfortable determining what they're going to do in certain aspects. And so, the ultimate goal for the Buffalo Bills has to be preserving the best years of Matt Milano, because they're slowly running out. And eventually, Matt Milano's production will go down to the point where he's not a good IDP player. But as of right now, I still think Matt Milano has a role to play as a linebacker in the Buffalo Bills defense. But that should just about do it for this segment. We are transitioning back to the NFC East, talking about a teammate of Dexter Lawrence's who is definitely primed for another big year. A guy who now has the partners he needs in crime to really focus on developing himself as a player. And this should be quite a good segment to finish out today's show and the week. We'll be right back to discuss whoever that is after the break.